Nestled amidst the fog-blanketed hills of Austria, Moosam Castle rises from the dense forest like a dark sentinel watching over the land. Its towers pierce the skies, a chilling silhouette against the backdrop of the Alps, while its stone walls seem to pulse with secrets long buried. Time has not been kind to Moosam Castle. The years have worn down its once pristine exterior, leaving behind a ruinous shell. But it is the whispered tales of its past that have turned this castle into one of the most sinister places in Europe. The castle's reputation has been built on blood spilled during a dark, horrific chapter of history. The land itself seems cursed, and those who dare to walk its grounds often feel a deep sense of unease, as if something is always watching them from the shadows. Local villagers speak in hushed tones about the strange occurrences and eerie happenings surrounding the castle. Some say the spirits of the past still roam its halls, trapped in an endless cycle of torment and vengeance. Others claim that the very walls of the castle are alive, haunted by forces far darker than anything the living can comprehend. Moosam Castle's origins stretch back to the early Middle Ages, and it was once a grand fortress, home to powerful aristocrats. But as the centuries passed, it became a place steeped in bloodshed and suffering. The castle's most infamous chapter began in the 17th century during the witch hunts that ravaged Europe. In those dark days, Moosam Castle became a place of unspeakable horror. It is said that the castle's dungeons were filled with innocent men, women, and children accused of witchcraft, most of whom were tortured until they confessed to crimes they did not commit. The screams of the accused are said to still echo through the stone walls, their anguished cries rising from the bowels of the castle, seeking justice for the wrongs done to them. But it wasn't just witches who met their grisly fate within the walls of Moosam Castle. The brutal history of the castle is also tied to the rise of an infamous figure, Count Georg von Kuenberg. He is said to have been a sadistic ruler who revelled in cruelty, his name forever linked with the countless executions that took place in the castle's shadowed chambers. The Count's thirst for power and his unyielding belief in his divine right to rule led him to commit unspeakable atrocities, and the bloodshed during his reign is said to have soaked into the very stones of the castle. It is believed that Kuenberg himself dabbled in dark magic, summoning forces beyond human understanding in an attempt to solidify his rule and achieve immortality. Some say that his evil acts awakened something ancient and terrible that had long been dormant in the castle. It is said that when he died under mysterious circumstances, his soul did not depart. Instead, it is trapped within the castle, forever bound to the walls he once ruled. Those who enter the castle report hearing faint whispers in the air, as if the Count's voice is still calling out to them, urging them to join him in his eternal torment. The next day, 2 groups of men were deprived of their taxi ride the next day or the day after. Even in the present day, visitors to Moosam Castle report feeling an unnatural chill in the air, an overwhelming sense of dread that seems to follow them wherever they go. The atmosphere inside the castle is thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the distant creak of old wood or the sound of footsteps echoing through empty halls. It is said that the spirits of the tortured souls who perished here are trapped, their anger and pain rising from the depths of the castle, forever seeking revenge on those who dare to intrude, Hermione said. One of the most chilling stories associated with Moosam Castle is that of the witch's curse. According to local legend, a woman named Elsa was accused of witchcraft in the 1600s. She was brought to the castle's dungeons, where she was tortured mercilessly, her body broken by the cruel hands of the inquisitors. As she lay dying, she cursed the castle and all who would ever dwell within its walls, vowing that their souls would be as trapped as hers, never to know peace. The curse, it is said, still lingers to this day, Those who visit Moosam Castle often report hearing strange sounds, whispers in the dark, the faint rustling of fabric in the empty halls, the eerie sound of footsteps that seem to follow them even when they are alone. Some claim to have seen figures moving in the shadows, their features obscured but their intentions clear. They are the restless spirits of the past, forever bound to the castle by the vengeful curse of Elsa. The castle's dungeons remain a place of nightmares, and anyone brave enough to venture down into their depths will find themselves walking in the footsteps of the tortured souls who met their end there. The air is thick with the stench of decay, and the sound of dripping water echoes in the darkness. Visitors have claimed to see ghostly figures standing in the corners, their hollow eyes fixed on them, as if they are waiting for the next victim to fall into their grasp. And then there are the unexplained phenomena that continue to plague the castle. Objects move on their own, doors slam shut without warning, and lights flicker, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The very atmosphere of the castle seems to shift, as though the walls themselves are alive, reacting to the presence of those who dare to enter. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Moosam Castle is the sense that something is always watching, the feeling of being stalked, of being pursued by unseen forces, is overwhelming. It is as if the castle itself has a mind of its own, an ancient consciousness that waits for the right moment to claim another victim. The souls of the witches, the victims of Count Kuenberg, and the countless others who met their end within these walls seem to linger in the castle's every corner, forever trapped in a cycle of torment and vengeance. And as the sun sets behind the crumbling towers, casting long shadows across the land, the castle becomes an even darker place, its history more palpable, its spirits more restless. As the wind howls through the trees surrounding Moosam Castle, it carries with it the faint sound of whispers, the voices of those long dead but never forgotten. They beckon those brave enough to enter, urging them to uncover the secrets hidden within the walls. But be warned, once you step into the castle's grasp, you may never leave. For Moosam Castle is not just a place of stone and mortar. It is a living, breathing entity, a place where the past never truly fades, and the darkness will always find a way to claim you. As night falls over Moosam Castle, a chilling fog begins to crawl from the surrounding forests, creeping through the cracks in the castle's ancient stone walls. The wind howls, rattling the broken windows, carrying with it the scent of earth and decay like the breath of something long dead. The air grows heavier with each passing moment, as if the very castle itself is coming alive, stirring in anticipation. The castle has seen countless years of suffering, pain, and bloodshed, and now, in the silence of the night, it stirs with something more sinister. The walls seem to whisper in a language long forgotten, secrets only the dead understand. Status slowly becomes self-importance. There are those who claim that the spirits of Moosam Castle do not merely haunt the halls and dungeons. They are bound to the very stones, feeding on the darkness that permeates every crevice. It is said that the restless souls of the past linger in the corridors, their spectral hands reaching out, yearning to drag the living into the abyss with them. Many who have entered the castle speak of an overwhelming sensation of being watched, a cold, oppressive presence that fills every corner of the castle. The feeling is suffocating, as if unseen eyes are following every move, waiting for the moment when they can make their presence known. Some say the castle itself is cursed, that it was never meant to stand as a monument to human ambition. It was built atop an ancient burial ground, a place where the earth itself was saturated with the blood of those who were wronged and betrayed. As the construction of the castle progressed, the land seemed to resist, pushing back against the stone foundations, as though the spirits of the ancient dead were unwilling to let the living impose their will upon them. The curse grew stronger with each brick laid, until it became an undeniable force, one that could not be ignored or escaped. In the deepest corners of the castle, where the light of day has never reached, there are rooms so steeped in darkness that they seem to absorb the very light that dares to enter. These rooms are said to be the true heart of the castle's horror, where the souls of the tortured and murdered still cry out for vengeance. Visitors have often reported seeing fleeting glimpses of figures in the shadows, pale, twisted shapes that vanish when looked at directly. But it is in the corners, just beyond the edge of vision, where the true terror lies. Those who dare to linger too long in these dark corners are said to be drawn into the nightmare that waits within. Chaos reigns. Today there may truly be a standstill before there is time for an apparition. The castle's cursed history is intertwined with the blood-stained hands of Count Kuenberg, whose name is synonymous with cruelty and madness. It is said that he took great pleasure in the suffering of others, seeing each torture as an opportunity to exert his power over those he deemed beneath him. His appetite for cruelty was insatiable, and he sought out new ways to torment his prisoners, using his position as lord of the castle to avoid the consequences of his actions. But even he could not escape the wrath of the spirits he had enraged. It is rumored that before his death, Count Kuenberg made a desperate attempt to make peace with the vengeful forces that hunted the castle. In his final days, he was seen wandering the halls, muttering strange incantations and performing rituals meant to appease the restless souls he had wronged. But it was too late. The spirits, long angered by his atrocities, had already marked him as their next victim. On the night of his death, a terrible storm swept through the castle, the winds howling like the cries of the damned. Lightning struck the highest tower, illuminating the castle in a blinding flash. And when the storm cleared, Count Kuenberg was found dead, his body twisted and contorted in a grotesque mockery of life. Some say it was the spirits who took him, dragging his soul into the depths of the castle, never to be seen again. But the Count's death did not bring an end to the terror. Instead, it only deepened the castle's curse. The spirits that once roamed the halls seemed to grow more restless, more violent. They began to manifest with increasing frequency, their ghostly forms drifting through the castle's corridors, searching for those who dared to enter. Their mournful wails could be heard echoing through the castle's stone walls, a chilling reminder of the blood that had been spilled and the pain that lingered in every corner. One of the most enduring stories surrounding Moosam Castle is that of the Phantom Bride. Legend has it that a young woman, once a beautiful bride-to-be, was tragically murdered on the night of her wedding. The details of her death remain shrouded in mystery, but it is said that she was betrayed by those closest to her, her life cut short by a cruel and senseless act. Her body was found in the castle's courtyard, blood staining the stone as she lay lifeless, her eyes wide open in shock and fear. But it was not her death that caused her to become a legend. It was her spirit. Her ghost, dressed in a wedding gown, is said to appear on the anniversary of her death, roaming the castle in search of her lost love, her anguished wails echoing through the empty halls. Those who have seen her speak of her pale face, twisted in sorrow and rage, and her eyes, which burn with a fierce, unrelenting sadness. It is said that if you encounter the Phantom Bride, she will follow you, her mournful presence hanging over you like a dark cloud, until you too are drawn into the tragic story that has bound her to the castle forever. As the years have passed, the castle has fallen into ruin. The once proud fortress now stands as a crumbling monument of the horrors it has witnessed. But despite its decay, the castle continues to draw the curious, the brave, and the foolhardy. For those who dare to enter Moosam Castle, the lure of its dark history and the promise of uncovering its secrets is too great to resist. yet many never return. Those who do speak in hushed tones, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes haunted by what they have seen. Some claim to have seen shadows moving where there should be none, others hear footsteps following them when they are alone. But the most common tale among survivors is the sense of being watched, the feeling that something is always just behind them, lurking in the dark, waiting for the moment to strike. There are those who say that Moosam Castle is not merely haunted by the souls of the past, but that it is alive with something darker, something ancient, something that feeds off the fear and suffering of those who enter. The castle's evil seems to grow stronger with each passing year, and those who come to investigate find themselves drawn deeper into its web of terror. Many leave with their minds shattered, unable to comprehend the horrors they have witnessed. Some claim to hear voices in their heads, urging them to stay, to give in to the darkness that lies within. But for all the terror that Moosam Castle has witnessed, there is still one question that remains unanswered. Why does it continue to haunt the land? Why does it continue to draw the living into its grasp, never allowing them to escape its clutches? Perhaps the castle itself knows the answer, but it will never reveal it. For Moosam Castle is a place of eternal darkness, a place where the past never fades and where the spirits of the dead are forever bound to the land. As long as the castle stands, the nightmare will never end, and as long as the whispers of the past continue to haunt the halls, there will always be those who fall victim to the castle's insatiable thirst for fear. Those who enter may never leave, for once the darkness takes hold, it is impossible to escape. In the dead of night, when the castle's silhouette is barely visible against the darkened sky, a strange energy seems to pulse from its stone walls. It is as though the very air around Moosam Castle has become thick with despair, an invisible weight pressing down on all who come near. The land around it, once lush and green, now appears barren, as though nature itself has been stripped of its life force by the dark presence that resides within the castle. No bird dares to fly overhead, and no animal ventures near the gate. It is a place of desolation where even the natural world recoils in fear. Those who venture too close to the castle speak of a deep, gnawing unease that overcomes them as they approach the gates. The closer they get, the more intense the feeling becomes, until it seems as though the castle is watching them, waiting for them to cross the threshold. Many who have dared to step inside have described a coldness that pierces to the bone, an unnatural chill that seems to seep into their very souls. Their footsteps echo through the empty halls, and the silence becomes deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the old wooden beams, or the distant sound of a door slamming shut somewhere deep within the castle's heart. There are some who say that Moosam Castle is not a mere building, but a living, breathing entity. It feeds off the fear and suffering of those who enter, growing stronger with each passing day. The longer one stays within its walls, the more it begins to exert its influence, slowly twisting the mind and warping the perception of reality. Visitors have reported seeing things that aren't there, hearing whispers when no one is around, and feeling the presence of something lurking just beyond their line of sight. The walls themselves seem to shift and change, as though the castle is alive, shifting its rooms and corridors to trap its victims inside. For some, the terror becomes so overwhelming that they lose all sense of time and place. They wander the castle's maze-like halls for what feels like days, weeks, or even months, unable to find an exit. The oppressive atmosphere weighs heavily on their minds, and they begin to see things, horrible, twisted visions that leave them questioning their own sanity. Some claim to have seen figures moving in the shadows, their faces twisted in agony or rage. Others have heard faint cries for help, only to turn a corner and find no one there. But the most terrifying thing of all is the sense that they are not alone, that something is watching them, waiting for the moment when they will succumb to the castle's dark power. There is a particular room within the castle, known only to a few as the Room of Shadows, that has been the site of numerous disturbing occurrences. The door to this room is said to be hidden, buried deep within the castle's labyrinth of corridors, accessible only to those who are invited, or those who wander too far from safety. Those who have found the door speak of a cold, foreboding presence that emanates from within, as though the room is a gateway to another world, a world of darkness and madness. Those brave enough to enter describe the room as suffocating, the air thick with an unnatural chill, and once inside they say that the shadows themselves seem to come alive, twisting and moving like living things, their forms constantly shifting as though they are trying to escape the room. The faint sounds of whispers and cries for mercy can be heard from deep within the darkness, and many have left the room with their minds broken, unable to comprehend what they have witnessed. There are also those who claim to have seen a figure in the room, a tall, gaunt figure dressed in tattered robes, its face hidden in shadow. Some say it is the spirit of Count Quinberg, the cursed lord of Moosam Castle, forever bound to the walls of his own creation. Others believe it is something far older, an entity that existed long before the castle itself, an ancient being that feeds on the suffering of the living. Whoever or whatever it is said to have a terrible power over those who enter its domain. It is said to be able to read their thoughts, their deepest fears, and use them against them. And for those unfortunate enough to come face to face with the figure, the consequences are said to be dire. Some have vanished without a trace, while others have been driven to madness, their minds shattered by the horrors they have witnessed. Chal appétit. But even those who are lucky enough to escape the castle are not free from its curse. Many report experiencing strange phenomena in the days, weeks, and even years following their visit. Some claim to hear whispers in the dead of night, voices calling their names from the darkness. Others report seeing fleeting figures in their peripheral vision, shadows that seem to move of their own accord. And then there are those who say that they are plagued by nightmares, terrifying dreams in which they find themselves trapped within the castle's walls, unable to escape. The air is thick with an oppressive presence, and no matter how hard they try to wake up, they find themselves trapped in the nightmare, unable to escape. For some, these dreams never end. They are forced to live with the knowledge that they are forever connected to the castle, its curse lingering long after they have left. The legacy of Moosam Castle is one of darkness, death, and despair. It is a place where the past refuses to fade, where the blood of the innocent still stains the stone, and where the screams of the tormented can still be heard echoing through the halls. It is a place where the living and the dead are forever intertwined, bound by an unbreakable curse. And for those who dare to enter, it is a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurs, where the terror of the past becomes the terror of the present. In the end, Moosam Castle remains as it always has, standing as a dark and foreboding monument to the horrors it has witnessed. Those who enter may leave, but they will never truly escape, for the castle's curse is eternal, and its grip on the living is as strong as it has ever been. And as long as the castle stands, the nightmare will never end. The winds around Moosam Castle howl as they whip through the trees, sending cold shivers down the spine of any who dare to venture close. The very landscape surrounding the castle seems to carry an eerie weight, as though it is bearing witness to the horror that has unfolded within its walls. The forest that encircles the castle is dense, its twisted branches blocking out the sunlight and casting everything beneath them in perpetual shadow. Few animals are brave enough to roam these woods, and even fewer dare to speak of the strange occurrences that have been reported in the area. There are those who believe that the trees themselves have become part of the curse, feeding off the death and suffering that has seeped into the earth beneath them. Locals speak in hushed tones about the castle's dark history, warning any who may ask about its past to stay away. It is said that the land around the castle has always been cursed, a place where dark forces have gathered for centuries. But it wasn't until the construction of Moosam Castle that the true horrors began to manifest. The castle's foundation was built upon the blood of the innocent, and the screams of those who met their untimely ends still echo through the halls. Some say that the stones themselves are imbued with the suffering of those who died in the castle's dungeons, while others believe that the very soil beneath the castle is soaked with the blood of the executed, the tortured, and the damned. As the years passed, the castle became more than just a building. It became a symbol of fear, of suffering, and of death. It stood as a monument to the horrors of the past, its walls echoing with the whispers of the souls trapped within. And those who dared to visit, whether seeking adventure or curious about its dark past, were often never seen again, or worse, they were never the same when they left. Many came seeking the truth about the castle, but few were ever able to uncover it. Some say that the answers lie hidden deep within the castle's shadowy halls, where even the bravest souls fear to tread. Others claim that the truth has been buried beneath the weight of centuries of bloodshed, obscured by the castle's ever-encroaching darkness. As night falls, the castle comes alive with a sinister energy. The wind howls through the broken windows, the shutters rattling against their frames as though the castle itself is trying to communicate, to warn those who dare to get too close. Those who have stayed the night speak of hearing strange sounds, the soft scrape of something moving along the stone floors, the distant sound of chains clanking against the cold stone walls, and the unmistakable sounds of footsteps echoing through the empty halls. But when they turn to look, no one is there. They say that the castle is never truly empty, that it is always inhabited by the spirits of those who met their tragic ends within its walls. These restless souls wander the halls, searching for peace that they may never find. Among the most infamous of these spirits is the ghost of a woman known as the White Lady. Her story is one of heartbreak and betrayal. She was once the wife of a nobleman, but her life took a tragic turn when her husband was accused of treason and executed in the very courtyard of the castle. Heartbroken and distraught, she spent the rest of her days wandering the castle in search of her lost love. Her mournful wails filling the halls, it is said that she can still be seen to this day, her ghostly figure drifting through the castle, her face twisted in grief, her hands outstretched as though searching for something, or someone. Some claim to have heard her cries late at night, her voice rising above the wind, while others have reported seeing her pale form gliding silently through the halls, her eyes filled with sorrow and longing. But the White Lady is not the only spirit that haunts the castle. There are others, many others, each with their own tragic story, each trapped within the castle's walls for eternity. Some are the victims of cruel executions, others are the tortured souls of those who are forced to suffer in the castle's dungeons. Some wander the halls seeking revenge, while others simply drift aimlessly, their souls lost to the madness that consumed them in life. The restless spirits are not content to simply haunt the castle. They are driven by something darker, something far more terrifying. There are also reports of an entity, far more terrifying than any ghost, something that is not of this world. Some say that there is a creature that lives within the castle, an ancient being that preys upon those who enter its domain. This creature is said to be able to take many forms, shifting and changing as it pleases, always lurking just out of sight. Some claim to have seen its eyes glowing yellow or red, peering from the shadows, and others have reported hearing its growls, low and guttural, as though it is waiting for the right moment to strike. But no one knows what it truly is, and those who have encountered it are too terrified to speak of it. It is said that the creature has existed within the castle for centuries, feeding off the fear and suffering of those who enter, and it is not easily defeated. The castle's curse extends far beyond its walls, infecting the land around it. Some say that the very earth beneath Moosam Castle is cursed, that it is soaked in the blood of the innocent. The trees surrounding the castle are twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal hands, as though they are trying to drag the living into the darkness. No animal dares to approach the castle, and even the wind seems to avoid it, carrying with it an unnatural stillness that settles over the area. Some claim that the curse extends even further, that the souls of the dead are not confined to the castle, but wander the surrounding land, haunting the nearby villages and towns. People speak of strange occurrences, of figures seen moving in the distance, of lights flickering in the windows of the castle at night, and of a constant, unsettling feeling of being watched. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of Moosam Castle's curse is the way it seems to reach into the hearts and minds of those who visit. Visitors speak of feeling a deep, overwhelming sense of dread that cannot be shaken, no matter how hard they try. It is as though the castle is alive, its very presence pressing down on the soul, causing the air to grow heavy and suffocating. Some say that the castle feeds off the fear of those who enter, growing stronger with each passing moment. Others believe that the curse is a living thing, feeding off the negative energy created by the suffering and death that has taken place within its walls. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is certain: the castle has a power over those who enter, and it is not one that can be easily escaped. For those who have dared to enter Moosam Castle and survive, the experience is forever etched into their minds. The horrors they have witnessed, the darkness they have encountered, and the chilling presence that still lingers long after they have left, will stay with them forever. No matter how far they may travel, they will never be free from the castle's grip. And for those who choose to visit Moosam Castle, the choice is clear. Once you enter, you may never leave. The castle will claim you, and you will become another part of its dark and twisted history. As the sun begins to set behind the towering peaks that surround Moosam Castle, an oppressive sense of dread seems to descend upon the land. The skies darken, casting an eerie twilight over the surrounding forest. The wind stirs the trees in the distance, their branches swaying in unison, as if they are alive, whispering secrets from centuries past. Yet, despite the grandeur of the surrounding natural beauty, a thick, suffocating silence surrounds the castle itself. It is a silence that chills the bones, as if the very earth is holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to unfold. There are no birds to be heard, no rustle of leaves in the wind. Only the occasional creak of the castle's ancient stone walls, groaning under the weight of history. Even the animals in the area know better than to approach the castle, sensing the dark forces that linger within. Stories abound of the creatures that once roamed the woods near Moosam Castle, wolves, foxes, and deer, who upon drawing too close to the castle would suddenly disappear without a trace. Those few who dared to venture into the woods and search for them would return to the nearby village with wild, terror-stricken eyes, speaking of strange, shadowy figures that seemed to watch them from the corners of their vision, moving just beyond the reach of the torchlight. Some villagers claim to have seen the figures of lost souls wandering the woods at night. These restless spirits are said to emerge from the thick mists that roll off the forest floor, their forms indistinct and fleeting, as though they are constantly shifting. At times they are heard wailing, their voices carried by the wind echoing through the trees. Others report hearing strange footsteps in the night, muffled and slow, as though someone or something was following them, keeping just out of sight. These reports come not from the few brave souls who sought the truth about Moosam Castle, but from those who live in the nearby villages, who know better than to wander too close after the sun goes down. The local legends are filled with horrific tales, passed down from one generation to the next, warning of the dangers of the castle and its cursed grounds. One of the most chilling stories involves a group of travelers who once sought refuge in the castle during a storm. They were told by the innkeeper in the village that the castle was abandoned, a relic of a forgotten era, and that it would be safe for them to stay there for the night. When they arrived at the castle, they found its imposing gates open, as though beckoning them in. The wind howled around them as they entered, but the doors shut behind them with a deafening clang, sealing them inside. As the night wore on, the travelers grew uneasy. The castle felt wrong. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound seemed amplified in the oppressive silence. How many times had they felt the external world's absence in the night? By midnight they had become desperate to leave, but the door would not open. They were trapped. It was then that they heard the first whisper. At first it was faint, barely audible, as though someone or something was speaking from the other side of the castle. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct, and as they did, the travelers could hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching them from the darkened halls. The torches along the walls flickered, casting long, grotesque shadows that seemed to writhe and stretch unnaturally. The travelers' hearts pounded in their chests as they realized they were not alone in the castle. The air grew colder, and their breath came out in icy puffs. The whispering voices now echoed throughout the halls, their words unintelligible but full of malice. In the distance, they saw a flickering light, as if someone was carrying a lantern down one of the castle's long, winding corridors. Faint silhouettes emerged, only to vanish when the light grew too bright. The travelers attempted to follow, but the castle's layout seemed to shift. The walls seemed to close in on them, twisting and turning in impossible directions. They were lost in the labyrinthine maze of the castle, and as they wandered through its endless halls, the whispers grew louder, and the strange, shifting figures began to move closer. Suddenly they stumbled upon a room, its door slightly ajar, and inside they saw something that made their blood run cold. The room was filled with strange, ancient symbols etched into the stone floor, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. At the center of the room stood an altar, upon which was a long, blackened sword. The air in the room was thick, oppressive, and filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. The travelers stood frozen in place, as they saw a dark figure standing in the shadows, its features obscured, but they could feel its gaze, cold and all-seeing, piercing through them. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the figure was gone. In its place, a chilling laugh echoed through the room, hollow and mocking, as if the castle itself was toying with them. The travelers turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a deafening crash, and just as quickly the room was filled with darkness. The last thing they heard was the sound of chains rattling, followed by a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from deep within the earth itself. The next morning, the villagers found the castle's gates open, but the travelers were gone. Their belongings remained, abandoned, in the rooms they had stayed in. No one could explain what had happened, and some claimed to have heard the faint sound of laughter echoing in the wind. The innkeeper, who had sent them to the castle, never spoke of it again. But every night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, he would lock his doors and windows, terrified that the shadows of Moosam Castle would come for him too. No one knows what truly lurks in the depths of Moosam Castle. Some say that the spirits of those who died in the castle are trapped in a never-ending nightmare, wandering the halls and seeking vengeance for their untimely deaths. Others believe that there is something far darker at play, something ancient and malevolent, a force that has been feeding on the fear of those who enter for centuries. There are whispers that the castle itself is alive, its very walls imbued with the dark energies of the past, a reflection of the suffering and torment that has occurred within its confines. As the years go on, Moosam Castle continues to stand, a silent witness to the horrors of the past its dark legacy etched into the landscape. And for those brave or foolish enough to enter, the curse of Moosam Castle remains ever present, a reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be closed.